right. Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for coming first thing on a Monday morning. I appreciate that. We want to welcome you all here. We've got a few different staff members from COGS, so I'll introduce myself and then point out who we have also on Zoom today. So my name's Amanda Palmer. I'm the grad assistant for the College of Graduate Studies. Been in this position since 2020, so I got a few years of experience doing that. We also have Michael Decker here, who is our director of grad student support programming, my supervisor, and then we also have Jan and Brittany from the COGS office who work with our forms and study plans and many of the things that we're going to be talking about today. So it's helpful for you guys to be able to see their faces and just to know they are resources. And we'll talk a little bit more as the presentation goes on, kind of where you can find us in the building and that kind of thing. So I will get started with the presentation in just a moment. I might need you guys to bear with me a little technologically because my hope in this presentation is to sort of switch back and forth from the Zoom slides to the actual forms that you'll need to fill out. And occasionally that has gotten a little bit buggy going back and forth from Chrome to PowerPoint. So I think it'll work though. We've made it work in the past. So I already introduced myself, but I also want to say I am a doctoral candidate in the College of Education, Health and Human Sciences, all but dissertation. So I've gone through a lot of these steps other than the graduation ones, and the electronic thesis and dissertation ones haven't quite gotten there, but soon. And I also have completed a master's degree at U of I, so I do have experience with that as well. So I just wanted to let you know I'm coming with a little bit of experience as well as having worked with COGS for a few years. So, okay, let me get back into the presentation mode slide over here. Okay. So what we're going to cover in this presentation is the different steps that you need to do along the way that are COGS specific. The purpose of this presentation came up when I started in the position. We didn't quite have a presentation like this. I just realized I didn't start the timer on my little presentation. I need to double check what time we're at. Okay, right after 10. Sorry. Okay, so when I started as a master's student at U of I didn't even realize that I needed to have a major professor. I didn't know anything about a study plan, and so I found out about that from a professor in a research methods course. She was standing in front of the class and said, "Do you guys know you're supposed to have a major professor? Do you know about a study plan?" And I was completely clueless. Sorry, my computer went a little weird. That's okay. So a lot of the purpose of this presentation was to draw attention to where the resources are on the COGS website, what resources exist, and help you to know what the steps are. We used to separate this presentation by master's students and doctoral students, and then we realized that it is really similar, and we try to just make it really clear which of the steps in the process are only for doctoral students and which of them are for both. So before we get started, I want to do just a couple of things. I want to announce that on the 28th, so next week, we will have another presentation in the Grad How-To series, so same time, same channel. And that one is about study plans and degree audit. So we'll mention those a little bit during this presentation, but we'll go into way more detail next Monday, step-by-step instructions, that kind of thing. And then also, if you missed it, we had a how to format your thesis and dissertation workshop on October 7th. And that one went into a lot of detail about the ETD, or electronic thesis and dissertation process. And we have a recording for that. So one of the things that I want to do, okay, there's a thing. We'll look at that a little bit later because my computer is being weird. But for those of you who are in the Canvas course right now, you may already know about what resources are available, but if you're not, you should have received an invitation to it. If you didn't receive an invite, you can send a direct message to Michael in the chat. He can take down your email and make sure you get added to the Canvas course, but it has links to all of the recorded workshops from this semester, previous semesters. It has links to everything we're going to do in this workshop, including these slides, because all these slides have clickable forms, and the PDFs will be on there later today, so that you can click on them. But there's also just sections in the Canvas course itself for each step of the degree process. And so with the links and everything, so you don't have to go into the whole set of slides if you don't want to. You can look at your specific step. So we've tried really hard to make students more aware of where these resources are. And I'm going to give you a look at each of them over the course of this presentation. So that was a lot of intro info, but the main steps we're going to talk about: choosing your major professor, creating your study plan, the different forms and documents, and all the resources along the way. Okay, so one thing kind of philosophically that I want you to think about is to focus on the step that you are on, but also to be thinking about how it relates to the other steps along the way. Some of these things are really related to each other, and some of them, if you're a little further down in your degree, maybe you skipped one or two of these and you need to go back and do them. So it can look really overwhelming, especially for doctoral students. There's a lot of steps. But focus on where you are at in the process and any steps you haven't yet completed, and try not to get too overwhelmed by the steps that are in the future. But it can also be helpful to know what they are, take some of the mystery out of them. That's our goal. I'm going to click on the steps to your degree guides. And these used to exist on the COGS website in a little bit different format. I'm actually kind of proud of these little PDFs because I created them with the links, and each of these also have links, although we need to update a few of them with my UI instead of VandalWeb, but we're getting there. So these were updated as of August, and then everything changed, of course, but most of the things are still good. Now that I have Chrome open for the moment, I can show you what I was going to show you in the Canvas course, is that we've got workshop recordings here. And this is where you can see recordings and slides. We got all the Grad Student Essentials series from the library, one of our mental health series. Some of the workshops aren't recorded for various reasons, but the ones that are will be here. Formatting your thesis or dissertation, applying for GPSA awards. So we have many resources there. And then I will go real quick also just to these forms and procedures. These are the things we're going to talk about today, but you can also find them there. There's also funding opportunities, GPSA. So again, you should see if you're, wait, hold on. Let me go to my dashboard of Canvas. So this is what it looks like: a U Idaho course, 2024-2025 COGS support. If you're not already in there, send Michael a message and he can get you in there. All right, let's see if I can get back to PowerPoint. I think I can do it. There we go. I did it. So there's also a master's steps to your degree that we have here. Okay, so the very first step that we're going to talk about is the very first step that you need to take as you start your program. I know there are a few programs where your major professor, I think this is mostly for MFA students. There are so many different unique circumstances, but most students will have a very specific major professor. Sometimes it could be your department chair. But your major professor, sometimes when you come into a program, you have your major professor when you are admitted. Like, they need to take you on. If you've been admitted without one, then you'll need to do that right away. So for master students, you need to appoint a major professor within the first year of your program. For doctoral students, by your third semester, but the sooner the better for this step. That is really important because your major professor is going to help you with the other steps along the way. and is going to be your main mentor and have a huge impact on your whole degree program. If you have a supportive mentor or an unsupportive mentor, that can be challenging. Sorry, getting tangled up in my microphone cord. Okay, so I'm going to show you this form because this is one everyone definitely will need to do. This is your major professor or committee appointment or changes form. And this is one that you'll use multiple times, most likely, as you go throughout your program. I'm also going to scroll down and show you that there's instructions for it, which is very helpful. So one little tip I didn't mention quite yet is that when you're looking for any of these things, honestly, I still do this. I have said I need to bookmark everything, but I still don't. I just Google U Idaho COGS forms. You can even Google like U Idaho COGS major professor form, and you'll get to it. And so that is really the easiest way to find the things you need. And later we'll do a lot of thesis and dissertation resources, and you can also search U Idaho COGS thesis resources, that kind of thing. U Idaho COGS dates, deadlines. So keep that in mind. It makes it a lot easier to find all these awesome forms. So this is a fillable form. So this one, when you first fill it out, it'll be signed by your major professor and your you'll be doing the first line for your major professor. And then we'll talk about your committee. Wait, is that in this one too? Yes, sorry. For your committee, this will also be this form. So if you're appointing your major professor and your committee at the same time, that might happen. You would put everybody on here and check the major professor box for that. And then you're going to need to have your major professor signature, your department chair signature, and then once it gets submitted, the College of Graduate Studies will sign that as well. This is also an important form if you make any changes, if you need to remove a major professor, remove a committee member for whatever reason. That's very important. I'm trying to look at, so I've had kind of co-presenters in the past, and so I watched the last presentation and wrote down all the extra stuff that they filled in the blanks for. And they had said that it's very important that your committee is formed when you're a doctoral student before your preliminary exam. And that is something we're going to talk about soon. And then for thesis students, it should be as soon as possible, but well before your last semester. And for master students who don't have a thesis, if you're on a non-thesis track, you might not have a committee. Your committee, in quotes, may be your major professor, and that's okay. So if you have specific questions about that, again, we're mostly going to do questions at the end. We'll save a little time for that to make sure we can address things that you need to know. All right, let's go back. And so these forms, again, will be in the Canvas course as well as in the slides, which will be available. But the form and the resources are the same document. It's just that second page is the explanation. And all right. So moving on, your study plan. This is a really, really crucial step for a lot of reasons. For master's students, you want to do it by the end of your first year. For doctoral students, you want to do it by your third semester at the latest. It is really essential to do this on time. And one of the reasons for wanting to do this on time is it can save you money. You can't apply to graduate unless you have an approved study plan. And again, just to let you know, we will have that workshop next week with detailed steps on how to complete this. So I'm not going to go into detail about that. But we do have resources about it. Okay, but to save money. So you can't apply to graduate till you have it approved. It can take a little bit of time to get it approved. And so there's like the early bird kind of fee for applying to graduate. And then if you miss that deadline, which you might do if you're trying to get your study plan approved, then it's going to be a much higher fee. That's not very fun. So also another way it can save you money is that if you think that you've completed everything you needed to, and then you create your study plan and it's denied for some reason that you haven't completed everything and you have to take another course, especially if it's just one and you're a part-time student or something like that, that can add up. The money can, and that can really mess up your timeline and everything. So creating your study plan is a process that should happen initially with your major professor. You don't want to have your major professor see it after you have first submitted it within your student profile in MyUI. You want your major professor to look over it with you prior to submitting it. They shouldn't be surprised by your study plan. So what I did personally for my master's study plan and my doctoral study plan, and I actually changed it when I changed major professors, was to create one in Excel, looking at the doctoral handbook or the grad student handbook for the 2 different degrees. And I looked at those requirements and then looked at COGS requirements and created it based on my plan or what I was going to do, and then showed it to my major professor. And then we needed to make a few changes. And so I waited until we had a good plan. Then I put it into MyUI. And the way to do that, you go into MyUI and get onto the student profile card and then go to degree audit. I believe that's on the left-hand side in the black box. I can't really show you that very well, just with see all my Vandal number and all that stuff. It's a harder one to show you. And also I couldn't put the link to MyUI because it's just a mess. So you guys should have experience by now getting into MyUI and your student profile. But you can let us know if you do not know how, we can help. But yeah, your department and your major professor are going to be your best resource for getting started on that, for knowing what should be on it. And just a couple basic things is that it used to be set up when I first started my master's, it was set up that it had to be by semester. And you were supposed to complete it in the semester that you said, and it was more complicated. Now it can just all be a list of the courses you plan to take. So if you end up taking it in spring of 26 instead of spring of 25, it doesn't look wrong in any way. And so you can do that, and then editing it is also not super complicated. One question we get a lot is if you take a different course, how often do you update your study plan? And that's really a question with your major professor, because things are going to change, especially if you get your study plan in early. There may be a class that you were expecting to take and then it's not offered, or it's offered at a time that doesn't work for you. And so making those changes, you want to make sure that you're not putting your degree in jeopardy by taking a different course. It does need to be approved, but you don't necessarily have to immediately go change your study plan if something changes. So again, consult with your major professor in terms of that. One thing a lot of people wonder about is the transfer credits, and that can be a little bit complicated. I believe that so I'm clicking on the instructions for a new plan, and this does have some details here. Again, next Monday, show up or watch the recording and we can talk about that. But this does go through 18 pages of instructions there. And there are resources on how to do that. And then whoops, I went the wrong way. Sorry. Just a moment. And then like a doctoral plan, we do have a guide of what needs to be in it. And this is the COGS doctoral guide. So like a program through COGS must have a doctoral program. Make sure you know which one I'm talking about, must have 78 credits. So your doctoral degree program for your department, for your specific major, it could have more, but it has to have at least 78 to pass the COGS requirements. And then, so it's important to look at these. If your graduate handbook should line up with this, but because they know the COGS requirements, but sometimes they will allow a little bit different things, and this is your minimum that you need to make sure is happening. And so like a maximum of 45 research credits, at least 52 over like 500 or above. So you just need to make sure. And that doesn't mean you can't take other classes. You can take more than 45 research credits. They just will be in addition. Like I have some research credits from my master's that don't transfer over to my doctoral degree. That's fine. I needed to take them. And you might need to take some extra classes. When you submit your study plan, you'll be able to see what counts and what doesn't count. So a couple more pieces of advice. Your study plan will first go to your major professor. They will need to approve it. You should get an email. I didn't know this in the beginning. You should get an email. When it moves up, it'll go to your department chair. Then it'll go to COGS, and COGS will review it. If it's rejected, when COGS sends it back, there will be a note about why it's rejected. If you don't understand the note, just contact them in COGS and they'll be able to explain it to you. And at this point, I believe that's Brittany you contact. She's nodding. So there will be a note. If you see that it's not approved and it seems to be stuck and you haven't gotten, yes, COGS-forms, that's the email. Thanks, Michael. If you see that it's just not moving or you haven't gotten an email, you can also reach out to COGS at the COGS-forms or just show up in Morrill Hall and they can help you, because COGS can see where in the system it is. They can see if it's with your major professor, if it's with your department. If you've already heard from them, it could be stuck at the registrar's office too. Like COGS tries to be really efficient getting it back to you. We've heard sometimes it can take a little while once it gets to the registrar's office to be approved. And then they send it back to COGS to give you the final approval, I believe. And so again, that process takes a little bit of time. It can take, I think, a couple of weeks or so. And so you don't want to wait until you've already tried to apply to graduate and they said, hey, hang on, you don't have a study plan. You cannot yet apply to graduate. So I think I covered most of the things. So there's lots of instructions, degree audit, requirements and guidelines. You really need to use your major professor as your best resource here. Oh, one thing I like to say. Sometimes you're going to have a major professor or committee members who leave the university. When you have a study plan in place, it's kind of like a contract with the university that if you complete these things, they're going to hand you that degree at the end. And so if something crazy happens and you need to appoint a new major professor, you have that in place already, and that can be really helpful. Okay, that was a whole lot of information about study plans. Okay, so we are going to talk about one of the most mysterious things I have ever heard of in the graduate student experience. Now, if you are a thesis or non-thesis master's student, you don't need to stress about this. Doctoral student, I highly recommend listening. Okay, so the preliminary exam and advancement to candidacy does not need to be scary, but I have heard from so many students that they don't know what it is. And that's because it is not something that COGS puts out there. It's something that your department, even your major professor, has a specific expectation. And that can mean so many different things. It could be a publication or multiple publications. It could be a written or oral or combination of both exam. It could be, for me, my major professor gave me multiple options, and mine ended up being a portfolio of kind of accomplishments, presentations I needed to present at national conferences. I highly recommend, as soon as possible in your program, asking, what am I working towards for my preliminary exam and advancement to candidacy? Because for me, I figured that out early on and realized, all right, I got to start submitting abstracts to national conferences right away. I need to do that. I need to find, like, I did need to publish, but it didn't need to be in a professional academic journal. I published in a magazine in my field. I mean, a research-oriented magazine, but it wasn't a journal. And so the earlier you know exactly what it is, the earlier you can prepare. If you know that it's going to be a written exam on particular topics, you can put all of your related papers on those topics into a folder or copy them into a folder so that you have them to look at. I know for me, my grad program, all my assignments are like A4 or assignment 6. And I'm like, what the heck are those? And it is so hard to go back and find topic specific papers at times. So if you know what you're working towards, that's really, really helpful because then you can keep notes that are relevant in a certain place or just have, and again, we have so many different colleges, so many different emphasis areas. So talk with your major professor about that. Also, if you are feeling a little stressed about what you find out that it is, ask for examples, especially early on. A lot of major professors have a collection of preliminary exams, and they can help you to know what it's going to look like, what a successful packet looks like, or publication looks like, or whatever it is, or example questions that people have been given in the past. Okay. Talking about when this happens, your full committee needs to be appointed and the majority of courses on your study plan are complete. For my particular major professor, I needed to have all of my courses complete, and she required that I couldn't even register for dissertation credits until I had advanced to candidacy, which was a little frustrating to me because that is not the case with most folks. Anyway, neither here nor there. So the timing of your prelim is at the discretion of your program, but that is the general timeline there. And when you have completed that, there's a very specific form, report of preliminary examination that you can find on the COGS forms website. And it needs to be signed by your whole committee. And they need to submit this. This is really important for you to advance candidacy because you're not going to graduate unless you're already a candidate. Okay. And let me double check my notes on here. Yeah, the only real note that they have said in the past is that students often ask COGS about what they need to do to get this form signed, and COGS doesn't have a specific requirement. Okay. Moving on to writing your dissertation or thesis or preparing for your non-thesis project or culminating activity. This is something that, whoa, just really wants to jump forward. I think that presentation doesn't want to write a thesis or dissertation. We have lots and lots and lots of resources in terms of the COGS formatting requirements. Again, we do recommend that you go back and watch the recording from October 7th. Molly Sheffield is our electronic thesis and dissertation advisor. And she is amazing and very helpful and gave a whole lot of good advice. This particular slide is all about the template. I will talk about that. But in terms of timing, so for the ETD process, the electronic thesis dissertation, you'll hear ETD a lot. A lot of students are afraid to submit their thesis or dissertation into the program, the actual database thing, until it's like done, ready to go, because they're afraid of who's going to see it. And so she emphasized multiple times how important it is when you have a good draft, not a completed draft, not an approved by everyone draft, but a good draft. You can put that in there early on so that if there's formatting issues, they don't screw you up in the end. Because a lot of people have tables and figures and particular places and pages they want things to be. Your left-hand margins need to be larger, and just that fact, when you don't know that, it can mess up a lot of formatting. It can change a lot of things. And so we highly recommend using this, the thesis and dissertation handbook. So this is the page that Michael linked to in the chat. It's got all sorts of helpful resources, but I want you to look at this gray box. You guys are seeing that, right? Doesn't look like it's screen sharing. Okay, thanks, Michael. In the gray box over here, you've got on the bottom, there's the handbook reference, which is a PDF, helpful, but the handbook example is a Word document that you can download, and then you can literally write over it. I'm gonna go back to the slide. Here we go. The highlighted portions, this is just a screenshot of the first page, but it's a long document. And so this is what your first page what your title page needs to look like. And you will change the highlighted things if needed. I mean, probably you're not going to call your dissertation or thesis template. So you'll need to change the things, put your name, put your major professor, all of that. But it's all formatted and spaced for you. As well as like the table of contents, which drives people absolutely bonkers. The table of figures and forms, you've got example figures, got example headings, it's all in there formatted. Those kind of things can just really make students struggle at times. And that can be extremely difficult. And so yes. So if you look at the template, at least before you start your writing or early on in the process, and then ideally you just put your document in there and make it fit, so that you're formatting margins, size of font, that kind of thing. And there are some COGS requirements, which are all listed in the handbook. But a lot of people ask about, like, does it have to be a certain, what's the thing, APA or MLA style? Sorry, I was forgetting that word. And it does not, but it does need to have some things consistent. There's specific guidelines about spacing, about size of font, and then you can have, if your chapters are multiple articles, you can have either references at the end of each one, or you can have a complete references for both of them at the end. But if you put 2 articles in, or 3 or whatever, but if the journal that they were submitted to, if this is your situation, if they used different styles, you're going to have to be consistent. And so you can't have one article that's one style, one article that's another. You'll have to change one of them. So knowing that ahead of time is really important, because that can be a big headache, and you don't need that at the end. You want to be working on content and finessing your wording, not worrying about reformatting an entire chapter. Ooh, not fun. So get that in there as soon as possible. Again, Molly went over all of this on the 7th. It's in the recording, but I do want to, just lost my train of thought. There was one more thing I wanted to say. Oh, in the ETD process, there's a couple times where you need, or at least one time where you need to submit like a document that you may not have ready, or there may be questions that you don't quite know the answers to. You will have opportunities to change all of that later. So if you need to upload a document that isn't your dissertation, that you don't have completed yet, that's okay. Just do a blank page or something, or a random page. It really doesn't matter. And you can always reach out to Molly Sheffield to ask her about that. So there's many more things to say about that, but the timing is really at the discretion of your major professor, but it's important to figure that out with them. Your application to graduate, it seems like this step would come a little later with all of the dissertation and thesis timelines, but it actually doesn't necessarily come later. And there's all sorts of reasons for that. Okay, I'm gonna go to there's a lot of information for application to graduate, and I wanna do a good job. So you want to look at the academic calendar. So I'm at that point where I'm like, all right, I'm getting close to graduation. I'm hoping for May. It might not happen, but I'm hoping. And so I would highly recommend going to the current deadlines page. I'll go to that now. And looking at when you need to apply to graduate. So this is specifically on the registrar's page. This isn't a COGS page, but the deadline has either $25 or $60. It's not that big of a deal, but sometimes it's that big of a deal. So I highly recommend submitting your application to graduate prior to the late deadline. This does need to be in conjunction with your major professor. You need to be expecting to graduate the following semester, or at the end of that semester. So the timeline ideally is one semester prior to your expected graduation. It doesn't have to be that far ahead, but the sooner you do it, the sooner they're going to check your study plan, the sooner they're going to see if everything is in order. I do want to mention, so there's also timeline for your dissertation and thesis, or non-thesis requirement, and those are separate from the priority deadline for applying to graduate. But I want to mention Grad 720. So graduation and awarding of your diploma are two a little bit different things. You can walk in a ceremony of your choosing, even if you're not quite graduating at that point. It does need to be approved by your major professor, the form. You can't just randomly say it. But you can, there's a section when you're applying to graduate called your ceremony walkthrough, and you can choose that even if you're not quite done, like in the spring and you're going to finish up in the summer, you can still walk in the spring, or if you finish up in the summer, you could walk in the fall. But you need to be registered when you apply to graduate. And so Grad 720 is a really amazing opportunity if you're in a kind of specific situation. So you need to have all of your coursework completed, and all that is left is to defend or submit your thesis or dissertation. Grad 720 is usually thesis or dissertation students. It's very rare for a non-thesis student to be in Grad 720. But what it is it's a 0 credit course, and it's about $140, which is about a quarter of the cost of enrolling in another one research credit, or like a $500, $599, or $600. Part of the reason that you should be in a research credit, it's a little hard to word that. If you're not using a significant amount of your faculty advisor or committee's time, that's the best time to be in Grad 720. If you are still meeting with them and getting their mentorship and advice, then you should be paying for a credit. And so Grad 720 is when you're just tidying things up, doing the technicalities of finishing your dissertation. And if you're not really sure, that's a good thing to, one, ask your major professor, and two, you can talk with COGS. You can come in and say, all right, is this a good option for me? Does this make sense? Because they've talked to lots and lots of students. You can only enroll in it twice before you would need to then enroll in a 1 credit course if you needed to be registered to apply to graduate. So you want to use it in a way that makes sense, but when you apply to graduate, you do have to be currently registered for a course. And yeah, so there's a lot of resources there. But I do want to encourage you, even if you're not sure if you're going to graduate, like I am not 100% positive that I'm going to graduate in May, but I'm going to apply to graduate before the deadline. And that is mainly because COGS will hold on to that application to graduate until you're sure, until like we know, okay, this stuff got done, everything is submitted, everything is good to go. And you can cancel it and then you won't be charged. It's only charged when it gets processed through the registrar's office, but they'll honor that date that you submitted it. So if you're not totally sure if you're going to graduate the next semester or not, and your major professor approves you applying to graduate, you can do that. So again, you'll need to get into My UI, get onto your student profile, and you'll select apply to graduate. And yes, okay. I think I covered a lot there. Again, there's going to be individual situations. Everybody is a human with different stuff going on in their life. So if you're not certain where you fit into the timeline of things, if you want some advice, COGS can definitely help you to sort through, okay, you've done this, this, and this, you haven't done this, it's not quite time to apply to graduate, or yes, apply to graduate now and make sure you get this completed. So don't be afraid to talk to them or to Michael or me, or well, not me. I can't really help you make that decision. One thing I do want to note, it may not be an issue, but if you are an international student, registering for a 0 credit course could have different implications. I'm not going to say what those are, but make sure you check with the International Programs Office before registering for a 0 credit course, just in case. It's also important to know that if your funding is contingent on you being registered full-time, which all the assistantships, RAs, TAs, all of those are contingent upon that, it's important that you make sure you are ready to not be fully funded in terms of like your life situation. Okay, moving on. Okay, so this, whoops, nope. Okay, sorry. My computer got really warm. It was 97 degrees in my office this morning, which was fun. And so my touchpad doesn't want to work. Okay, so this is a very overwhelming table, but I highly recommend that you figure out your intended graduation date. So like, okay, for me, I'm hoping to graduate in spring 2025. So I would look at that line with on the left, spring 2025. I'd look at, all right, I want to only pay $25. And I actually went, the last time I did this presentation, I went to this page, the COGS deadlines page, and bookmarked, really? Sorry. I'm not sure why that even happened. Okay, so I went and I took 5-10 minutes, put in my phone this January 21st. I put 2 weeks before that, or 1 week before or something, a reminder like, hey, you need to do this, apply to graduate by this date. I did the same thing for request to proceed, last day to defend, COGS ETD approval, final committee ETD approval, and then the date of the degree is the graduation date. And so I highly recommend you look at your target once you know it. You may not know it yet. Totally okay. But once you know it, look at your target date and then put those dates in the calendar. So you need to be, again, registered for the semester before. And so with the no registration dates, I'm not as familiar with those. So I would definitely recommend talking with someone in the COGS office if you're not sure about the no registration, because it's really no registration during that semester, but you did already apply to graduate when you were registered. So again, individual situations, but highly recommend going to the COGS deadlines page, which has thesis and dissertation deadlines. And so again, you can go UIdaho COGS deadlines and get to this page. All right, back we go. We're moving on. Okay, we've got about 15 minutes left and just a little bit of stuff. We'll definitely make sure to leave time for questions. So request to proceed with the final defense of your thesis or dissertation or completing your non-thesis exit requirement. Okay, so for those who need to have a defense, there is a request to proceed form that your whole committee must sign. So it's helpful just to see what the form looks like and what you need to have. You need your title, you need your location and date and time. And that is all very important. So there are some deadlines, such as applying to graduate, that you can have some leeway. If you are defending a dissertation, you have to file it 2 weeks before, 10 business days. That is a requirement. COGS or U of I is required to advertise to the public all dissertation defenses. That has to happen. So if you do not, you won't be able to defend unless you do it 2 weeks before. So that is a very hard and fast deadline. No wiggle room there. For master students, honestly, it can be the day before. I wouldn't recommend that. It's ideal to get it submitted earlier, but it has to be just before it happens. So don't stress about it in the same way as a doctoral student needs to stress about it. But don't stress, just plan ahead. Once you know when you want to do it, make sure you get that submitted early. So, and then the resources I have here, and I think on several of the next slides, are just your thesis and dissertation tools and links that have all sorts of more helpful information. If you want to take some time to just read through those, it's going to answer a lot of your questions. Okay, then this is just a particular form that you need to take, and some defenses are not in person. They're going to be on Zoom. And so just to make sure everybody knows, you don't have to have physical signatures on some of these forms. Or I don't think you need physical signatures on any of the forms. They can be e-signatures from your committee members and everything. We understand that a lot of our graduate students are throughout the state, throughout the country. We even have some that aren't in the country at times. So this form needs to be taken to your final defense for completion, and it must be returned within 7 days after your defense. The non-thesis report form, your major professor submits it when you have finished. So for my master's degree, I had been a thesis student, and then COVID happened, and my research location was closed for COVID. It was a summer camp, or not summer camp, but Moss Outdoor Science School. And so I switched to being a non-thesis student, and my non-thesis report didn't quite get submitted. And I didn't know that because, again, this is one of those things that you should get an email saying, hey, this has been submitted and you're moving forward. So you need to kind of be on top of these things. I didn't realize that. My name was in the commencement, so I thought all was well. And then it turned out I almost didn't get my diploma with the date of 2020, which I really wanted. I wanted it to be 2020 because of how crazy that year was. I've got 4 children. Finishing a master's degree during that time felt like a huge accomplishment. So I was really wanting that. Anyway, so your final defense report is not one that I can link to because you only get it after you have submitted your request to proceed form. If you don't have your final defense report, you know that you didn't submit something. You did not submit your request to proceed, which is really important. And then for the non-thesis report, if your major professor is struggling with that, there are instructions that you can direct them to. So, all right. And then submission of your thesis or dissertation, there are specific deadlines for doing that we looked at already. And it needs to be submitted by that specific deadline for that semester. So again, if you have done everything else and you're just still trying to tighten things up and get that final approval from your committee and to the point where they can approve that authorization to submit, that is the final form. And if you have not quite been able to do that and the deadline has passed, that is the ideal time to register for Grad 720. Finish that up in the next semester, and then you're golden. But the ETD process has those several steps, and you need to make sure that each of them happen and be aware of the dates. And is kind of a weird time to talk about this, but it's something to keep in mind that when you are selecting committee members, it's really good to talk with your major professor, because most or many major professors have served on many dissertation and thesis committees, and they know how, I don't know, people kind of get a reputation for being rapid responders or folks who take a long time to review your content. So it can kind of be a bit of a balancing act if there's an expert in your field that you want on your committee at the university, but they take a really long time to give feedback and to return forms and to review things. Ask your major professor about that and plan accordingly. It's good to communicate with your committee. How much time do you need to review this document? What are your expectations for me submitting it to you? Because your major professor might get things back to you within 4 days, and someone else might say, I really need 2 weeks of time to review this for whatever reason. And that really varies. And so it's good when you're thinking about your committee to figure that out. All right, let me make sure there was, no, I think we got all the extra notes that I forget to mention. So my final thing is we've got Jan and Brittany on the Zoom right now. I also mentioned Molly. Oh, I did not update her last name. I will do that before I put the slides up. She recently got married, so that's my fault. But Jan and Brittany and Molly are in Morrill Hall. Jan's full-time, sorry, room 104. Jan's full-time. Brittany and Molly are not always there. They're sometimes there, and so you can always reach out to them via email, COGS-forms, or have Molly's email. Either way can get to both of them. And if you want to meet with them in person to talk, you can always set that up for sure. They can let you know when they'll be in the office and when they can help you in person. Stephanie Thomas also is in the office, also a great support. She is the assistant to the dean of the College of Graduate Studies, Jerry McMurtry. And so she also is a resource, but there are only 3 convenience squares. So I put these 3 because they're the ones we're mostly talking about for these steps. And then upstairs in Morrill 201, myself and Michael, and we can also help you with making decisions about some of these steps. Though with the specific forms, specific study plan questions, your best resources are downstairs. But we're definitely here to help. And if we can't answer the question specifically, we can certainly send you in the right direction. Okay, that was a very overwhelming amount of information, I'm guessing. And we want to open it up if anyone has questions. These are our contact information in general, but if you want to take a moment and ask some questions now, we have 7 minutes left and we're happy to answer them. Or also Jan, Brittany, or Michael, if there's anything I didn't cover and you want to add into the presentation, please do. Thank you all for coming. We'll give I'm going to turn off the recording, but we'll still be here for a couple minutes. If you have questions, you can put them in the chat or.
Amanda, I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
So whatever I understand that my commencement date and my date to the graduate could be different. So, for example, I graduate in summer. So could I commence on fall?
Yes, you could. If your actual graduation date is going to be in the summer, you can choose actually either ceremony. If you'd prefer to walk in, I do think you have to get approval from your major professor that they're saying, yes, you will be done in the summer. But you can choose which ceremony. You could choose spring or fall if like one is more convenient for you, your family, anyone who might be coming. But yes, that is definitely, those are 2 kind of different things. Your thing you get handed at graduation does not have a diploma in it. So,
yeah. Oh, yeah, got you. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, any other questions?